So how do we know what standard to use to judge God? What absolute standard of right and wrong? And where do we get it from? So in our last video, we looked at the problems we have when we're trying to come up with a standard of right and wrong, and how our preferences and our emotions and our feelings and our differing opinions cloud the whole issue. And in the end, we don't really have a standard of right and wrong. We just have a standard of what we like and what we don't like. And this clouds the whole issue of right and wrong and makes it impossible to make any real judgments about morality. And certainly when it comes to God, we don't have a starting position at all. And indeed, if we start from ourselves as human beings on planet Earth, we've got a problem, because we don't have a basis on which to make any moral decisions at all. We know morality exists. We know, we have a real sense of right and wrong. Everybody has that. But the specifics are lost on us. And this gives us a real problem, because when it comes to judging God, well, we can't. And so there are two alternatives. One is that there are no moral standards at all. They don't exist, in which case, well, could God really do anything wrong? Could you do anything wrong? Well, there's no right or wrong. It's just what you don't like. And we look at God then and we can say, well, I don't like what you're doing, God. But that's about the end of it. We can't say that God is wrong in anything he does. You know, you can't say God's a hypocrite, because what does that mean? Big deal. On the other hand, if there is a moral standard by which to make judgments, an absolute moral standard, we're not going to find it among ourselves. We got to look outside of ourselves to find a source of right and wrong that does not change and that is always the same and doesn't depend on our differing preferences and opinions. So where are we going to look? We could look at the moon, and the moon tells us nothing. And we could look at the sun, and it's hot, yes, and it's quite far away. It takes us quite a long time to get there by car. And what does the sun tell us about what's right and wrong? Well, nothing. In fact, when we look at the whole universe and everything we see around us, when it comes to right and wrong, it tells us absolutely nothing. Dawkins says all there is pitiless indifference. So we have to look further. And we have to look much further. We have to look to the Creator who put it all there in the first place, which is God. And God is the Creator, and he is the one who's the moral lawgiver. He created a universe, a world, a people with a sense of morality, because he is a God of moral standards, and he is the moral lawgiver, and he is the place where we find the absolute moral standard by which to judge whether something is right or something is wrong. So in order to judge God, we are in absolute need of God. That's interesting, isn't it? That's a bit of an interesting position to get to. But from ourselves, we can't go anywhere. We have no basis for right and wrong at all. We need God to tell us what's right and wrong. And the thing is, while God is there, he has also spoken, and he has told us what is right and wrong. So we have a basis on which to judge each other, to judge our world, and to judge our Creator. If we're going to dare to judge our Creator. But some people want to judge him, so okay, well, let's look at where that goes. How do we judge our Creator? On what basis? Well, on the basis that he gives us, because there isn't any other basis. But think about this for a minute. While we have nothing of ourselves to make judgments about, we're totally dependent on him. So what is God's standard of right and wrong? God does have a standard of right and wrong, and it's in the Bible, big book. Can we summarize it? Well, Jesus summarized it for us. He said the law is summed up in two commands. One is this: To love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And he said the second one is like it. It is to love your neighbor as yourself. So here we have God's standard of right and wrong, and it's all based in love. How much do you do that is motivated by love, or motivated by just yourself, which is not generally very loving. It tends to be quite selfish, and which we tend to be. We tend to think of number one first, rather than God number one. We tend to be thinking of ourselves in that place, and in that we fail. But the question is, as we look at his standard of loving your neighbor, which includes, by the way, your enemy. That's very important. Jesus said, love your enemies. You know, what good is it if you love those who love you? Well, sure, anyone does that. You know, but the challenge for you is to love your enemies. How do you do on this scale of right and wrong? If you're going to stand in judgment of God, judgment God, you're going to judge God. How do you do on this scale yourself? Do you love your neighbor as yourself? Always? Do you love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Because the Father loves the Son and the Spirit. They love each other. How are you doing on God's standard of right and wrong? The only standard we have. Otherwise, there is no right and wrong, and if someone shoots you in the head, well, it's not wrong. It's just something you prefer didn't happen. So we see we've got a problem. We can't come up with a solution. We need God to give us a standard by which to judge God. And so the only way we can judge God in the end is by his standards, so we're dependent on him. And the question then is, as we judge him by his own standards, the question is, how does God do by his own standards? Does he keep them? Is he a good God? Or is he just a mega cosmic hypocrite? And that is a question for another video. Thank you very much for listening. Give it a thumbs up if you like it. Put questions in the comments section if you have any. And thank you very much for listening. Oh yeah, do subscribe. Did I say that before? I don't know. Anyway, subscribe if you haven't. It helps. And thanks very much. God bless. Bye.